Good morning, students. Today I am going to solve question number 5 of page 135 of your book. The chapter number is 5 and the name of the chapter is A Revision Tour to MySQL. Now consider the structure given below. So here it is. This is the structure in the shape of a rectangular box, and based on this structure I am going to write SQL statement to create a table named author. Now note one thing, that you simply cannot create the table named author just like that. At first you have to create a database and set that database as a current database so that you can place this table called author inside the database, which acts as a container. Now let me show you first how to create a database. Now before that, let me open MySQL workspace. Okay, so this is the startup screen of MySQL workbench, and this is the workspace where you are going to type the SQL statements. So let me first create the database using the command create database, and let me specify the name of the database as third database. Now this is the database, okay, under which I am going to create the table called author. Now after creating the database specified by the name third database, okay, I shall set this database as the current database. Okay, now let me first create this database. Okay, for that I have to click this flashlight button. On clicking this flashlight button, okay, a message appears in the output window. Okay, and if that message has been ticked, it indicates that our database has been successfully created. Now in the output window the message shows a tick mark, okay, and this clearly indicates that the creation of the database third database was successful. Now once I have created our database identified by the name third database, let me set this database as a current database. Now for that I have to use the use keyword and then specify the name of our database, which is third database, followed by semicolon. And after doing that, let me click on this flash symbol, okay, and again a new message appears in the output window and it has been ticked. So this indicates that the database third database has been set as a current database. Now under this particular database I can easily create the table named author. So let me create the table named author using the create table command. So as the name of our table is author, so I should write create table author and then move to the next line. I shall put a opening parenthesis, leave some gap, and then a closing parenthesis followed by semicolon. Now inside the opening and the closing parenthesis, which indicates the body of this table called author, I shall put the column names along with its data type and defined sizes. Now see, the first column name is AID, whose type is int, size is 5, and validation is primary key. Now note one thing, that I am not going to set the validation primary key for this column AID now. Okay, that I am going to set at the end once I have defined the specifications for each of the column, that is a name, a city till a country. So let me just copy this portion from here and paste it here. You can in fact type it also, but I choose to copy it. Okay, now see, the column name is AID, type is int, the defined size is 5. Okay, but you're going to keep the defined size along with the data type, okay, within bracket like this. So this is how you specify the column name AID, the data type int, and the defined size within bracket, okay, which is 5, and that should be along with the data type. Now just come to the next line. Here I'm going to set the next column, okay, which is a name with type varchar, size 50, and validation not null. So Let me write it out here again. I'm going to keep the varchar and define size together with the define size within bracket. Okay, so now not null is the validation which has been set for this column a name. The not null indicates that this column a name cannot contain entries which is null, or you can say that this column a name cannot contain blank entries. There should be some value in each of the entries for this column called a name. That is what not null indicates. Now the next column is act, type varchar, size 50, and again the validation is not null. So I'm going to keep that here. Let me put the define size within bracket. Then the fourth column is a phone. The type is varchar, size is 15 this time, and validation is null. So let me copy it. Okay, so the column name is a phone. Let me keep the define size within bracket along with the type. Now see, the validation that has been set for this column a phone is null. So this time this column a phone can accept null entries. Okay, so this time this column a phone can have entries which may contain blank values. Now note the difference between not null and null. When a column is set with the validation not null, that particular column cannot accept null entries, okay, or entries which is blank. But if a column is set with the validation null, then that particular column can accept null entries or blank values. So here in this case, a name and act, these two columns cannot accept null entries, whereas the column a phone can accept null entries. Now let's come to the last column, which is a country, whose type is varchar, size is 40, and validation is null. So let me copy it and paste it here. Now again for this column, let me keep the define size for the data type within bracket. Now let me make the alignment properly, okay, so that I won't be in a confusion later on. All of you, whenever you create a table, make sure that the alignment is proper, otherwise you will be in a confusion later on while dealing with problems encountered in the table. Now see, I have defined the specifications for each of the columns starting from AID, a name till a country, okay, as shown in this structure. Now one thing I have to do again is that, see, for the column called AID, I haven't set the validation as primary key, and that I have already told you before that I am going to set the validation primary key for the column AID only at the end, that is after defining the specification for the column a country. Okay, now that I have defined the specification for this column called a country, which is varchar as type, 40 as size, and null as validation, I am left with only one thing to do, that is setting the primary key for this column called AID. Now let me do that. Now for setting the primary key, I have to use the constraint keyword. Now note that constraint means a restriction, and I'm going to impose that restriction on the column called AID. Okay, and since I'm going to impose the constraint primary key on this column called AID, which is a type of a restriction that does not allow duplicate entries for a particular column, so for this particular column AID, okay, once I have set the constraint as primary key, this particular column shall not accept any duplicate entries. So let me set the constraint and then specify the name of the constraint. Okay, let the name of the constraint be aid underscore pk, which follows the constraint keyword, and then I shall use the primary key keyword, okay, to set this column aid as a primary key. And after writing primary key, then within bracket I shall write the column name, which is aid. Now I shall not put the comma. Why? Because this is the last statement, okay, inside the body of this table called author, and for the last statement I don't put a comma at the end. But for each of the statements before this last statement, that is starting from the statement for the column aid, a name till a country, I have put a comma. But for the last statement, keep in mind, never put a comma. Now again, let me make the alignment proper. Now this is the structure of the table that I have defined, okay, by specifying the column names, the data types, the file sizes, and the validations. Now that our database has been created, okay, which is known by the name third database, I'm going to place this table author inside that database. So for that, again, let me bring the mouse cursor over here, click on this flashlight button. Now this shall create the table called author, and that will be placed in our database called third database. Now as our table has been created, we can check the structure of our table using the describe command. Now for looking at our table, I shall write describe author followed by semicolon, and then click this flashlight button. So here it is. This is the structure of our table with the field names, okay, aid, a name till a country, the type along with the sizes defined, int5 for aid, varchar 50 for a name, okay, just as how I have created the structure of the table. Then null for the columns a name and act is no. This is because for a name and act the validation set was not null. And again, null for a phone and a country is yes. Again, for a phone and a country the validation set is null. That's why that is being reflected here for these columns. Again, for the field aid, the key is pri, so note that pri stands for primary key, and this is because for aid the validation set was primary key, which is indicated here. Okay, so this statement shows the structure of the table called author. Now initially, when I have created the table called author, there are no elements or there are no records for the table author. This is because initially the table will be entirely blank. Now to see the records of the table, I have to use the select statement. So simply write select star from the table name, which in our case shall be author, followed by semicolon. Now note that the star will extract, okay, the entries of each of these columns starting from aid, a name till a country. So that's what star does. Now again I shall click here. Now see, initially for our table called author, for each of these columns starting from aid, a name, act till a country, there are no entries. This shows that the entries are null, because initially whatever table you create, okay, it will not have any records or rows. Same is the case for our table author. Okay, once you have created this table, there are no entries. Now I have to add entries and or records into this table called author. Now just after creating the table called author, see the second part. The first question says write DDL statement to add a column email of type varchar defined size 255 in the table author. Now DDL statements are the data definition language statements. Those statements can be the create table statement, the alter table statement, the modify statement, etc., which can define the structure of a table or a database. Now, out of create table and alter table, I am going to use the alter table statement to add a column email of type varchar and define size 255, because in order to add this column email, okay, into our table, I have to alter the table in such a way that I can place a new column email into our table. So let me alter our table using the command alter table, and then I specify the name of our table, which is author. So I shall write alter table author, then I shall write add column. Now let me specify the name of the column that I wish to add. The column shall be email of type varchar and define size 255. So that is what I'm going to write there. So let me copy it and put it here, and then place a semicolon. Now here it is, the statement is alter table for altering the table called author, and then I'm going to put one column into it using add column, and the name of that column is email, type is varchar, and the define size is 255. Now I shall click here. Okay, so our table has been altered and a new column called email has been added into our table. Now let me verify that. You can verify that by again using the describe statement to show the structure of our table. So here it is. As you can see, the structure of the table shows a new column at the end, which is email with type varchar and the define size 255. Okay, so our table has been altered and a new column has been added. Now you can see, use the select statement to show the records of the table called author. See, initially this table contained no entries, okay, for the columns. This table contained blank records as indicated by null here, but you can see the new column email has been added just after the column a country, because I have altered our table student, okay, to add a new column called email. Now let's come to the second question. It says write DML statements to insert at least 5 rows in the table author. Now DML statement means the data manipulation language statements. Okay, now DML statements can be insert statement, it can be the select statement, update statement, etc. Now I shall use DML statements to insert at least 5 rows in the table. So let me add the first row. Okay, for inserting records into our table or database, I have to use the insert into statement. So I shall write insert into, then specify the name of our table, which in this case shall be author, and then write values. Now see, I shall start with AID value 1. Now note that its type is int. Now with type as int, our AID value, okay, shall not be enclosed within quotation. Okay, remember that only if the data type is varchar or date or char, okay, which are non-numeric, the values for their associated columns has to be enclosed within quotation. But for numeric data types such as int, float, double, decimal, the values for their associated columns shall not be enclosed within quotation. So only for the columns whose data type is non-numeric, their entries shall be enclosed within quotation. Okay, so in this case, for the columns a name, a city, a phone, and a country, since their data type is varchar, which is non-numeric in nature, their entries shall be enclosed within quotation. but for the column called AID whose data type is int, and since that is a numeric data type, so the entry for the column AID should not be enclosed within quotation. So that's why for the entry 1 of the AID column I haven't put it within quotation. Now I shall place a comma, then I shall give an entry for the column called a name. Okay, now a name, since it is the author's name, let me write the author name as Rudyard Kipling. The third entry is ACT, so let me say that Rudyard Kipling belongs to this city Mumbai. Then the fourth column is a phone, which indicates the author's phone number. Let me say the author's phone number be 7612345. Now see, even though the entry is numeric in nature, I have put it within quotation. This is because the data type for a phone is varchar, which is non-numeric. Then after that, see the last column, a country, its data type is varchar. So let me say that the country which Rudyard Kipling belongs to is India. Okay, and then I put a semicolon at the end and then click this flashlight button. So our first row gets inserted into our table called author. Now did it get inserted? I got an error message. This is because I have specified how many entries? 1 for AID, 2 for a name, okay, that is Rudyard Kipling for a name, Mumbai for a city, 7612345 for a phone number, and India for a country. Okay, but I haven't specified the entry for email. Okay, now you remember I have added a new column called email at the end. Okay, so again for email I have to specify an entry. So for email, let me specify rudyard100@gmail.com. so let it be within quotation. So this is the entry for the email. Now again, let me click this flashlight button. Now the first row has been inserted into our table. Now similarly, let me change the values. Now that AID is the column which has been set as the primary key, so it can accept only unique or distinct values. It cannot contain duplicate entries. So the entry 1, since I have already used, let me change that to 2. Okay, and let the second author be Charles Dickens. The city which he belongs to, let it be London. Let me change some digits to make the phone number different. And since London is a city in England, so the country will be England. Let me change the email from Rudyard100 to Charles100, and then click on this flash button. So the second row has been added into our table. Now again, I shall change this AID value to 3. So the third author shall be, let's say, Mark Twain. Let he belong to the city London, and his phone number be something like this. The country is England, and his email, let it be twain100@gmail.com. Let me click this flash button. Okay, so the third record has been added into our table. Now let me set the AID value as 4, the author name as Shakespeare, let the city be New York. Let me change the phone number and since New York is located in USA, so the country shall be USA. And let me write his email as shakespeare100@gmail.com. Click on this flash button. So once I click on this flash button, the fourth record has been added into our table. Now let me add the fifth record. Okay, let the author name be Maxim Gorky. Let's say the city name is Moscow. Let me change the digits. Country name is Russia, and let his email be maxim100@gmail.com, and just click the flash button. So the fifth record gets inserted into our table. Now once we have added all the 5 records, let me check by typing the select statement. I shall write select star from the table name, which is author, and then click on the flash button. So now on typing this SQL statement, select star from author followed by a semicolon and clicking on this flashlight button. Okay, here star retrieves the entries for each of the columns: AID, a name, a city, a phone, a country, and email. And these are the entries. That is, the first entry is 1 for AID, Rudyard Kipling for a name, Mumbai for a city, the phone number, that is 7612345 for a phone, India for a country, and rudyard100@gmail.com for email. So this is the first record. Okay, now as I have highlighted here, okay, this entire portion highlighted as blue is the first record of the table called author. Similarly, this is the second record, this is the third record, this is the fourth record, and this is the fifth record. So now the table is not empty, it contains 5 different records, and that was possible once I have inserted 5 different records into the table author with the help of the insert into statement. So I have already done the second question, that is to insert 5 rows in the table author. Now let's come to the third question. It says write DML statement to delete only 2 records from the table author. Now see, our table contains 5 records. Now out of these 5 records, let me delete 2 different records. So let's first delete the record number 5 corresponding to the author Maxim Gorky, and then the record number 4 corresponding to the author Shakespeare. The statement shall be delete from author where AID equal to 5. Now let me click on this flash button. So as a result, the last record corresponding to Maxim Gorky has been deleted. Now let me verify using the select statement. So it says select star from author. Okay, so on typing this statement select star from author, I shall be able to view the records into our table, records in our table. So here are the records, and the record containing the author Maxim Gorky is absent, so that has been deleted. Now the second record that I'm going to delete is the record corresponding to the author Shakespeare, whose AID value is 4. So again I shall use the delete statement as delete from author where AID equal to 4. Now on typing this statement, okay, the record corresponding to Shakespeare has been deleted. Now let me verify it using the select statement. So I shall write select star from author to retrieve the records. Now see, the record containing to Shakespeare has also been deleted, whose AID value was 4. As a result, I have already deleted 2 records from our table called author. So that serves the purpose of this question, which says write DML statement to delete only 2 records from the table author, and for that I have deleted the record pertaining to the authors Maxim Gorky and Shakespeare from our table called author. Now we are left with only 3 different authors, which are Rudyard Kipling, Charles Dickens, and Mark Twain. Now the last question says write DML statement to delete the details of author whose AID is 2. Okay, now this time I'm going to delete the details of author whose AID is 2. Now for AID as 2, the author name is Charles Dickens, so I am going to delete this particular record now. Okay, so for that I'm going to again write the delete statement as delete from the table name, which in this case is author. Then I should use the where clause, okay, where I'm going to specify that the AID value should be 2. This is because I'm going to delete that record from our table author whose AID value is 2, and the statement for that shall be delete from author where AID equal to 2. So I shall click this flashlight symbol. This deletes the record having the AID value as 2 from our table. So let me verify it using this select statement. I shall write select star from author followed by semicolon. So this shows the table with the record containing the author Rudyard Kipling and Mark Twain, okay, which are having the AID value 1 and 3. The author with AID value as 2 has been deleted, okay, and that serves the purpose of the last question, which wants us to delete the details of author whose AID value is 2. So as a result, we are left with only 2 authors, that is Rudyard Kipling with AID value 1 and Mark Twain with AID value 3. So I hope you understood how I have created the database to place the table author inside that database. The database that I have created was specified by the name third database, and then I have created the table author inside our database specified by the name third database. And for that I had to set the database called third database as the current database, okay, and for that I have used the database using the use statement, and then I have created the table which is placed inside that database, and after that I have inserted records into the table called author. Because initially the table author was entirely blank, I have added 5 records into the table after that. And then once I have added 5 records into the table, I started deleting 2 records, first with the AID value 5 and then with the AID value 4, and then after that I have deleted the record with AID value 2. So that was what was done in today's presentation, okay, and I have shown the MySQL workbench to you, okay, the workspace where you are able to type the SQL statements. So this is the workspace. So from the next class I will show you some more examples of MySQL practically. So with this I end my presentation here.